Over the next several months, she stopped hanging out with her friends and spent all her spare time with Rich. Soon she started forging her mother's signature on notes excusing her from classes and studied sex on Rich's waterbed instead. Now it's time for Puppets, Pupils, and Producers, a story of mind over matter. Over the next several months, she stopped hanging out with her friends and spent all her spare time with Rich. Soon she started forging her mother's signature on notes excusing her from classes and studied sex on Rich's waterbed instead. Then she quit her job at the fast food place, and even though she was excited to work with her new coach, she told herself she was too old to advance much farther in the sport of gymnastics and should quit before she got injured. When she made her decision to quit, she ruminated over the excuse she'd give her new coach. But her mental gymnastics were unnecessary when she realized that indeed the condom that broke a month before resulted in a pregnancy. She tried to loosen its attachment to her uterus by tumbling and smashing her pelvis against the uneven bars, but it refused to let go. Agreeing they were not ready to be parents, Rich suggested an abortion over adoption and reassured that one day they would be ready. Because she wasn't old enough to give consent, he secured his sister's identification and she registered under her name. After seeing the gynecologist and having blood drawn, they left with an appointment for the procedure. Returning the next week, Cassie sensed something wasn't right even before the nurse said the doctor needed to talk with her. Sitting behind his desk, he explained she had a different blood type than Rich's sister, who, unbeknownst to them, had an abortion at the very same clinic a year before. Cassie had no choice but to confess who she was and that she was underage. The sympathetic doctor said a parent would need to attend. Afraid to tell them, she went home and stood in front of the bathroom mirror and contemplated bleeding the life out of her and the baby. She found a razor that would do the trick, but set it aside when she thought about trying her mother's method of pills and a bubble bath instead. She cried for the life she'd never live, then she cried for the baby she'd never meet. When she'd cried until she couldn't cry anymore, she looked deep into her own eyes, and a sense of knowing she was meant for more overcame her. Empowered by forces unknown, she raised her chin and promised herself she'd learn from her experience. Agreeing that an abortion was the best option, her father reassured the problem would be eliminated and no one would ever know of her calamity. Her mother, however, decided her daughter was a whore and told her so. A repressed memory flashed on her mind's screen, and every cell in her body told her to run. But she stayed and fought for the little girl that in her mind she failed to protect years ago. Cassie spat back. Well, I guess that's what happens when your uncle starts messing with you when you're only 3 years old. Her shocked father said nothing, but her mother's vile tongue shot back. A liar and a whore, how becoming. She wanted to tell her parents what she thought of them, but she chose to run out of the house instead. She started running and didn't stop until she arrived at Rich's house. Once she was back in his arms, she regurgitated the details of her argument with her parents and eventually shared the secret she'd intended on taking to her grave. Rich held her tight and said she didn't have to worry about anyone hurting her anymore because he'd protect her, which was exactly what she needed to hear. Cassie laid on the cold operating table and shamefully spread her legs for the doctors and nurses. She heard the vacuum start and could see the decimated parts of the embryo accumulating in the canister, but she felt nothing. Instead, she thought about her courageous boyfriend sitting with her parents in the waiting room and vowed she'd prove her mother wrong and would restore her virtue by staying with Rich forever.